This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Now the backs there are. He backs it. He kicks it. Oh, the fall from Dersma. This is the speed of the culture. 3 bounces down the wing. He keeps going. 4 bounces. Joining the chorus. The Can't Lose Kangas are AFLW premiers.
Hello and welcome back once again to North Pod. Boy, what a shocking turnaround a week in football can have. That was one of probably the worst game we've played all year. We've played a couple of other bad ones, but this was just abysmal defensively. Reminiscent of the game that we played against the Hawks last round of last year, also in Launceston, where they trounced us by over 100 points. This one didn't quite get out to that, but it was threatening too. They were in the 90s, the lead at one point. Just an awful game of football. Not a lot of positive to take in the game. There are a couple of little things that we can take, but certainly not a lot of positive things to say about that game, unfortunately. And definitely, a step backwards from last week. You have a good win against Carlton. That being said, I think the Port Adelaide Carlton game on Thursday night probably shed some light on just how poorly Carlton are going, and maybe takes our win down a peg or two. You still win, so you take a win however you get them. But yeah, this was a tough watch. It's probably going to be a tough listen potentially, so strap in if you need to, and let's jump into a review. So team selection and just the one change, as you'd expect, a forced change only given the good game that we had played against Carlton last week. Charlie Comben with that shoulder just didn't look, like he was quite recovered. He really looked like he was hampered in that game, particularly late against Carlton. So he's come out. Will Dawson has come in, which I think is fantastic to get another game into someone who I hope is going to be a pillar for our side going forward. Came in and played in defence, which is not all the locations he's been playing. He's spent a fair bit of time forward this year as well, but came in, played some key defence, and I thought did show some signs. Certainly, he looked at home, but anyone in that back half in this game wasn't looking too comfortable. So he had his moments, I thought, Will Dawson, but certainly stood up and didn't look overawed by the experience. Robert Hansen Jr. was the sub, so third time in 4 games, if I can recall correctly. And he is the sort of player that's kind of on the fringes. You're not sure if he's going to be in each week at this point, so it makes sense as the sub. And I think going into the game, as a result of that, I thought I was feeling, confident that we're going to compete. I certainly didn't think we were going to win. I wasn't thinking that it was going to be a close game, but I thought if we walk away 4 or 5 goals, losers, not happy, but not unexpected. Carlton Hawthorn are a better team. They're coming off the bye. I thought they're fresh. They very rarely lose at Launceston. Probably a game that you'd expect to lose, absolutely, but a game that I thought, given our form, we could compete in. And off the jump, it wasn't good. Nick Watson, who I love watching, is one of those players that if you're an opposition side, you love to hate him. I still wonder if we should have drafted him. I've got no doubt he wouldn't be playing this well for us, just given the football that we're playing, generally speaking. But boy, you'd love to have him running around in our forward line. Anyway, he gut punches LDU essentially off the jump. I do wonder if he's going to be receiving a fine for that. But I think he set the tone. And then there was an undisciplined act not long after that. Jai Simpkin gave away a reversal free kick. Don't really know if there was a lot in it. I think he was just trying to do a bit of shepherding off. I think it was Lloyd Meek. I think he was just trying to give Tristan Xerri a cop-out, or a chop-out rather, actually. But the Hawks got on the board early. There was a bit of fire, a bit of spice early on in the game, but you could see early on that they'd come to play, and it was whether or not we were going to be able to rise to the occasion. They were getting the ball inside 50 quite a bit early, the Hawks, and were being really efficient when they went inside. They kicked 5 goals straight eventually. Pretty much 10 minutes into the game, they've kicked 5 goals straight, pretty quick. We were able to kick one out the back. Larkey got a good one, but then Nick Watson kicked one of the best goals I've seen out of the middle. Went to the middle for a clearance, won the clearance, followed up his own work, ended up kicking the goal, under pressure inside 50. It's that kind of stuff that really hurts your momentum. You kick a goal, you want to get the next clearance, and that's what we were able to do well against the Blues. We kicked a goal and then we won the next contest. We almost never did that in this game. We would kick a goal and immediately let the Hawks get one back. Jack Gunston was looking really dangerous early on. He kicked a couple of goals, and we just saw North Melbourne players just slipping over for fun. It was quite comical. The commentary certainly went on about it, and it was Jared Healy, so it's what you're going to get. I think to a point they were absolutely right, though. Like, there was a couple of Hawks that slipped over, but certainly far more North Melbourne players slipping over. Not too sure if that was, the boots they were wearing, the studs, or if it was just, the Hawks know how to play on this ground when it's slippery. It's really hard to say, but certainly we were slipping over a lot more than the Hawks were, and it was costly at times. There was definitely moments where we were in position to take possession and move the footy, or position to lay a tackle, and we lost our feet, and again, just the Hawks were able to slip past us and get the ball forward. So that continued on throughout the game. I thought, just example after example, it'd be a great funniest home video just watching the amount of times that we slipped over, if it wasn't for the fact that it was so frustrating and disappointing to watch, because it was just time and time again we were in position, we lost our feet, and it hurt us. So the first quarter wasn't good. There was really not too much to celebrate for us. Zach Fisher kicked a really nice goal on the run, pardon me, after end-to-end transition. We got it from a kick out. It was a really nice chain. Hardiman took a mark and played on quickly off half-back, got it going down the middle of the ground, and Zach Fisher was able to kick one on the run, sort of boundary side, 45 out. It was a really nice goal. So that showed that, if we were able to move the ball fast, we could beat Hawthorn out the back. We could beat their zone if we were able to move it quickly. But a lot of the time when we were kicking out, we'd kick really shallow and wide to the pocket, and then Hawthorn did a great job of closing in and forcing us to kick to a contest and not allowing us to move the ball fast. So there's a couple of times throughout the game where we were able to take it on, move fast, and beat Hawthorn at the back. I don't think defensively, one-on-one, their defenders were having a great night, but collectively as a whole, they were doing a fantastic job of, just corralling us and keeping the ball locked in their half of the ground. There was a couple of nice defensive moments. Griffin Logue had a nice defensive moment. He straight lined the ball coming off his man when he saw that the ball was there for the taking. I thought that was a good moment for him. He needs good moments at the present time. Griffin Logue is pretty out of form. I thought he had an okay game, when he found the footy, but certainly defensively plenty to do. We'll talk about the Hawks' tall forwards, but they had an absolute field day. So you wouldn't be giving any defender for North Melbourne much more than an okay game, and certainly some of them were ragdolled. LDU, unfortunately, had a really poor turnover, tried to kick it in board and just went, 20 to 30 metres further towards the defensive side than he wanted it, and it meant that it was a turnover. Unfortunately for us, I think it was Nick Watson wasn't able to finish the goal, but that's one of those ones that we've seen time and time again. North Melbourne just give up easy goals, particularly when we've got the ball where we should be doing something dangerous with it. Shocking kick, turnover. I do think we fought our way back into the quarter, but it was still a very poor game of football from our perspective going into quarter time. The score was 35 to 15, so a 20-point deficit at quarter time, and you thought the game was kind of teetering. There was signs that the Hawks could go on it, but I thought there were also signs that potentially we could come back in and at least make a contest of it, even if we didn't win it. I thought, to be honest, the second quarter put that to bed. The Hawks continued to corral us and keep us locked in our D50. They just didn't allow us at all to transition the football, except for, like I said, those 2 or 3 occasions where we went end-to-end and made it look easy. The other 98% of opportunities, they just locked it in and didn't allow us to have any easy kicks. It truly looked like we were playing a different game because our tackling and our footwork was just awful. And the Hawks, while I won't say they were playing in dry conditions, it was pretty close to. They were sticking their tackles. They were, for the most part, keeping their feet. And just the way they were able to hand pass the ball through congestion and find loose players at the edge of the contest who could then essentially have uncontested, time to make a clean decision was remarkable. It was night and day, the way that we were playing versus the way that the Hawks were playing. We were fortunate again, a couple of let-offs. Ramsden, the young player, took too long with the set shot and missed as a result, and we were able to have McKercher go straight up the middle with a really nice kick to a central location. Larkey got on the end of that and kicked a goal. So it's that, for the most, there was those two examples, one in the first quarter, one in the second quarter, where we were able to go fast and get it straight up the other end and kick a goal. But that was certainly the exception, not the rule. For the most part, we were being dominated in every area of the ground. The midfield just getting smashed. Not enough pressure on the Hawks as they kicked or hand passed. Their fast decision making, their precise kicks were getting it done, and we were losing contested ball time and time again. We were getting smashed in the clearances. I thought Lloyd Meek was definitely beating Xerri in the actual ruck contests, although Xerri, I thought, had the upper hand sort of around the ground, which is pretty rare. I think Xerri's strength is definitely when it's in tight and at the run contest. But I thought Lloyd Meek, who was a similar kind of really strong big unit like Xerri is, I thought Lloyd Meek definitely had the better of him, particularly in that first half. And then we just saw our midfielders not able to get into the game at all. Tommy Powell didn't have any impact. George Wardlaw wasn't having any impact at all, and then unfortunately was concussed, so had to be subbed out sort of midway through the second quarter, which I'll talk a little bit about later on. Even Shees, who I know is not an out-and-out midfielder, he's more of a high half forward at the moment. He wasn't having an impact in this first half, although we did see him go into the middle a little bit after George Wardlaw got subbed out. It was just a really disappointing performance from our younger mids, who are supposed to be, a strength for us. And I thought it was absolute domination. LDU was playing pretty well through the midfield, playing okay, bar that horrific turnover I mentioned. Luke Parker was playing okay. They're the two senior bodies in there as mids. Jai Simkin, I wouldn't have said was having a good game. He spent some time in there. And then, Wardlaw, Powell, not good games. And Sheasel, like I mentioned, wasn't having a great game, but also wasn't playing in the midfield at this point. It was just, a dominant performance. Will Day was doing what he liked. Connor Nash the same. Not Will Day. Connor Nash was doing what he liked. Jai Newcomb was doing what he liked. He was getting disposals for fun. It wasn't a good look for us at all. Jared Healy was loving it in that he was really enjoying talking down North Melbourne's performance, which is his want. I've spoken about it before. Not a lot annoys me in terms of commentary. I think for the most part I can just tune it out, and if you don't like it, you don't like it. But Jared Healy really does great on me, and he was in his usual form for a North Melbourne game. I don't know how he commentates so many games. I know North Melbourne probably is finding themselves in similar time slots, which generally means that Healy's going to be there. But even if the play looked good, he's looking at the negative side of it. Anyway, he was enjoying ragging on North Melbourne as per. I thought we had a really nice win on half-back with LDU. Smothered a hand pass, got a great pick-up, and past to Shees, we transitioned it really effectively to Paul Curtis, who goaled nicely from the pocket. And I think that was the most frustrating part of this game, is there were flashes of brilliance from us. There were flashes of things where you go, okay, I see it. I see that we have come a long way in the last few years. But then you bookend that with some poor performances either side, and Jack Gunston kicked one on halftime to absolutely, I thought at that point, just put the game to bed. 51 points down at halftime. You're not coming back to win. Like, we're not coming back to win with a margin like that. And if anything, you were concerned mostly about, is it going to really blow out? Which, to be honest, it did. My notes certainly dropped off in the second half, because it's like, what can you glean from it? I thought we made actually a positive start. We won a clearance, we got an entry, and I thought we competed pretty well to start the third quarter. And I wondered if we had made some changes and we were going to turn things around in the second half. But boy, it dropped off pretty quickly. Even though we saw some nice transitioning, you felt like, okay, we're going to get the ball moving faster, we're going to see some quicker ball movement, and we're going to give our forward the chance. But it didn't last long. The Hawks were able to find some momentum and get their scoring going again. They only kicked the 4 goals to 1 in that third quarter, but still, when you start 51 points up, it's still a fairly significant difference. Marbiol Chol was doing as he pleased. He slotted one on the boundary, 50 metres out. Any of that momentum or that, I guess, nice play that we were building up just sapped away by that goal. It was, you had to stand and applaud. It was a fantastic goal, and I thought consistently throughout the game, whilst they didn't get massive numbers on the board, the Hawks small forwards were just doing a far better job at meeting the ball at the front of the contest and then moving the ball quickly, spreading the ball quickly out of that contest to create opportunities for other players. Nick Watson was really lively early and did a good job of that. I thought Ginnivan was pretty consistent throughout. Even Dylan Moore, who eventually got subbed out, but I thought, between the three of them, they were doing a really good job of hitting front and square, whereas, that's just not a strength of ours. We're not able to do that consistently. We don't have those players that can more naturally read the play off a marking contest. And then, we go into the last quarter. Again, not a lot of positive things to say. It looks like Luke McDonald has got some injuries. I'm not sure if it was a shoulder but he had a really nice big hit on Weddle. He came off his man to make a contest so that Weddle wasn't running free into the forward half of the ground. He came off Luke McDonald shortly after that and didn't come back on. It was a really big effort, but hopefully hasn't cost himself. We saw Sheasel in some centre bounce in that last quarter, like I mentioned, which I think, at least we were trying some different things with the game gone. Chol and Gunston, it just became how many of the tall's going to kick for Hawthorn. Chol kicked another couple. Gunston kicked his 7th in the end, which was a career high for him. We just continued to be outmarked in our defence. Like, Will Dawson was doing some nice things. He took some intercept marks, as did Pink. But holistically, all of our tall defenders were soundly beaten. Even Ramsden kicked 3 goals. So if a player of that maturity and that experience is having the game that he was, he really should have had 4, given the fact that he stuffed up that one in the second quarter. It was not a good day defensively, but as always, it's not all on the defence. It was on the pressure coming in, or the lack of pressure with the ball coming in, because the Hawks just did such a good job of chaining up 3 or 4 hand passes, finding that player that had time and space to make a fast decision, and then executing from those positions. The game ended with a really nice chain involving Robert Hansen Jr., who, like I mentioned, came on pretty early on in the game and I thought did some nice things. He did kick a goal, I think, in the third quarter. And, whilst it wasn't a game that you'd go, okay, he's the future, I do think there were plenty of times he was able to get on the outside and at least impact things. Nick Larkey was able to kick a goal after the siren to kick his 5th. So a super efficient game from Nick. He really should have had 6 or 7. He missed a couple that normally he would kick. So a big return for him, given the fact that we only were able to put 65 points on the board. Final score was Hawthorn at 23-12, 150, North Melbourne 9-11, 65. So an 85-point walloping in the end. Certainly a game that, I would not be watching the replay of. I won't be watching this game again. It was an awful game for us to watch and just disappointing, given the fact that we'd been in, relatively promising form of recent weeks. I thought we had a really good block, and to play a game like this in the middle part of the season, it's a sort of game that can really collapse your season and dent your morale going into the last 2 months or so. So I hope it doesn't go that way. I hope it's more of a galvanizing game and one that is a turning point of sorts, because you are allowed to play a bad game. It's more how you respond to that and why it was such a bad game. We got smashed at contest, which a lot of that is effort. And some of it is not. Like, I think sometimes people will oversimplify things and say it's 100% effort. It's not 100% effort, but there is an element of effort, because even if you're not winning the footy, you've got to be able to stop the opposition. So I guess let's talk about that as we get to story of the game. So I mentioned it just before. I mean, the big impact here was the fact that we were just obliterated at contest. Clearances, we lost 44-30. Contested possessions, 135-110. So that's minus 25. We lost the tackle count 56-40, which is hard to do given how much of the footy the Hawks had. We lost contested marks 13-6, and a big part of that was the Hawks just taking marks for fun in their forward line and their forward half of the ground. And as a result of all of that, we lost the inside 50s 63-40, and I thought we actually got a couple of inside 50s going in the last quarter. So prior to that, it was looking even worse. I mentioned a big part of this is those midfielders that didn't fire. We talk about Tom Powell, George Wardlaw before he got unfortunately concussed. Unfortunately, the much lauded midfield group was not able to go with Jai Newcomb, who honestly just did as he pleased. He was definitely best on, take your pick between Chol, Gunston and Jai Newcomb for best on, or maybe Carl Amon as well. There was plenty of Hawks that got a lot of the footy, but John Newcombe was the one that was getting at the source, winning clearances, and getting metres on the footy for the Hawks. And, at times Luke Parker was standing next to him. I'm not sure if that was the matchup going into the game, but, I think generally speaking, you'd be pretty happy with that. Newcombe's going to beat Parker for pace, but they're both really strong players. They're both good overhead. I would have thought that, we could at least neutralise that battle. But yeah, just absolutely obliterated contest. Part of it was the fact that Xerri wasn't winning the ruck battle, but it certainly wasn't all on Xerri. I thought the Hawks mids just read the clearances a lot better, and even when it wasn't a clearance situation, just when it was a contested footy, given it was a bit wet, there were probably a few more opportunities to bend down and pick the ball up and win a hard ball. All across the ground. I thought the Hawks just did a way smarter job than we did. We lost too often. It meant the Hawks got the ball moving it forward and they just killed us. I mentioned it before. That hand passing out of congestion was elite, particularly given it was a slippery footy. They were able to find loose players who then had time and space to kick the ball forward, and invariably they found targets. They didn't miss too many going forward. Night and day compared to our defensive pressure in this game versus what we saw in that Carlton game. We just were unable to put any genuine pressure on the Hawks throughout the whole game. There were certainly moments where I thought we applied some good pressure. There were moments where our defensive work looked good, but holistically it was not a strong performance at all defensively, and that's the midfielders in terms of the contest, that's the defenders in terms of when the ball's coming in fast. It just was not at all what we wanted to see, particularly, off the back of a really nice game against Carlton. I thought the Hawks forward line really stretches us. They've got a lot of dangerous tools, but by the same token, you wouldn't be saying that Mabior Chol is a dangerous tool. I think he's the sort of player that can, get some momentum going, but I wouldn't have pitched him as a player that was going to be damaging us the way that he did. In any case, just a trouncing really in both areas of the ground in terms of the defence and also the midfield pressure, and a lot to work on. Last week I was talking about how improved the defensive structure was and how those gambles were paying off, and the zoning off was much more effective. It's hard to judge in this game how effective that was, but certainly one-on-one or man-to-man, we were absolutely beaten in the back half, and the way the ball was coming in didn't really allow for us to get a good gauge of how that's happening or why that's happening. But boy, we're going to need to see a significant improvement in both those areas of the ground next week. Shinboner of the week and the North Podium voting time. And look, I thought about it. I really struggled to find a really Shinboner-ish effort or player across the day. I think you could argue that there were a couple of fringe cases. Like I thought Jake Constanti's pressure at times was good, but probably not up for a Shinboner of the week. I thought there were some players that had some nice individual moments, like Zach Fisher's goal I mentioned was a really nice goal, but again, not necessarily in keeping with being the Shinboner of the week. So I've flipped it, and I've decided that the Shinboner of the week for this week can be any fan who sat through the entirety of that game, because it was a really tough watch. I don't think there's any sugarcoating that. So I would imagine if you're a listener of this, you've probably watched most of that game, if not all that game. You can be Shinboner of the week this week. The listeners can be Shinboner of the week this week. That's not to say that there were no players that gave effort. I thought there were definitely some players that did give effort. Oh, I sound like a Kiwi there, and I'll talk about those players or some of those players in a minute here, but yeah, I just couldn't find someone who, really stood out as a Shinboner. So the listeners can be Shinboner of the week this week. As you would expect in a performance like this where we lose by 85 points, it was tough to find vote getters. So there's only 5 in the votes. None of them got the 4 votes. None of them got the 3 votes. I was a bit iffy on maybe giving Larkey the 3, but I think the fact that 2 of his goals came in junk time, like the 5 goal is a really good tally, but probably the fact that 2 of them came in absolute junk time, I've notched him down to a 2. So I've got 2 players getting 2 votes. The first of those, Nick Larkey, kicked 5 goals, 3 from his 14 disposals, 7 marks, 1 of those contested. Also had a goal assist, so not just putting it through the big sticks. I think had he been able to kick 6 or 7, that would definitely bump him up to at least it would be a 3-pointer performance. But I thought it was a great show of endeavour by Nick Larkey. I thought that he presented all day. Obviously wasn't quite able to, have enough influence on the scoreboard, but it's really tough for him as a forward. He actually scored more than half of our points. He kicked 33 points himself, and we were 65. So a touch over half of our collective points shows that he was really, really effective up forward when the ball did get there. Certainly was effective in terms of creating scoring opportunities, and just, a shame that he wasn't able to convert a couple more of those opportunities that he had, and would have made it quite a significant bag if he was able to match it with Gunston or even kick the 6. So a really nice performance. He's been out of form, so I think it's pleasing that he's been able to get himself into some form, kick the 5 goals, and for the most part, most of his possessions were in that dangerous sort of 70 metres from goal. Did take a mark or two further up the ground, just when he needed to get a touch and get himself involved, but for the most part, he was doing his damage close to goal, and that's why he was able to kick those 5. And, he is a really smart runner, and that's why when we were able to get out the back a couple of times, he was able to find himself in the right spot. He reads the play really well and is fast in the way that he makes his decision. So he was able to create space for himself at the back a couple of times. So 5 goals, 3 for Nick Larkey is good enough for the 2 votes. And the other one who I thought was good enough for the 2 vote, pardon me, the other one that was good enough, I'm tearing up just thinking about this game again. The other one was LDU, Luke Davies-Uniacke. 28 touches, 5 marks, 10 clearances, 534 metres gained, 5 inside 50s. And beside that one really shocking kick into the middle of the ground, which, I feel like our best midfielders are good for, a shocking turnover per game. So I'm not going to completely rinse him just because of that. I thought he was definitely our best midfielder and did his best around clearance. 10 clearances in a game where we didn't have many. Several of those were those really good bursting straight towards goal and having a good impact in terms of meterage. So I thought he battled all day. Obviously wasn't quite good enough to neutralise the Hawks around stoppage completely, but by himself he did a wonderful job with the 10 clearances. I'll have a look in a minute who was next best for us. I think Parker had 6, so I'd imagine he'd be next best, but he was nearly a lone hand around stoppages for us. And did a fantastic job. Parker and Xerri had 6 and 5, so they were next best for us. It was tough for players like, I've mentioned them a few times, Wardlaw and Powell to get involved. So LDU did some fantastic work, burst away from stoppage, and played consistently well across the game, so worthy of the 2 votes. And then I've got 3 players here getting the 1 vote. The first of those, Colby McKercher, off half-back, tried his best all game. Probably maybe a little unlucky not to get the 2 votes, but I guess it's the old how effective or how well was he doing at creating scoring opportunities from his rebound. I thought he did the best that he could, 34 disposals, 4 marks, won an 82% disposal effectiveness. So I mentioned one of his chains created a score with a nice incisive kick that he bit off through the middle part of the ground, but probably just not quite enough drive and reward for effort from the rest of his disposals for me to push him up, but definitely played his role off halfback and didn't make too many glaring errors. So 1 vote for Colby, accumulated really well back there. 1 vote for Luke Parker, 29 touches, 4 marks, 6 clearances, 700 metres gained, 2 goal assists, 7 inside 50s, 7 score involvements. I thought alongside LDU was really good, but not as flashy, not as impactful probably as LDU in terms of the way that he was able to win his clearances. Obviously 700 metres gained again, he was just getting it on the boot in these slimy conditions and getting it forward, which is a positive. And the 2 goal assist says that, when he did go inside 50, he was able to cause some damage. So definitely played his role. Luke Parker, another game where we can see why we brought him across, because he was able to have this kind of impact in a game where the rest of his teammates weren't giving much. I did think that Luke Parker played his role and deserved the 1 vote. Maybe even could have been a 2 as well. It's sort of touch and go depending on how you saw his game. And then the last one I was definitely on the fence for, but this was more of a does he get a vote or not? And that's Tristan Xerri. 18 disposals, 5 marks, 1 contested, 3 tackles, 31 hit-outs, 6 of those to advantage and 5 clearances. I think he was probably just beaten in the ruck, but I do think that he beat Lloyd Meek around the ground. The fact that he was able to collect 5 5 marks. One of those contested, I think, is a big win for Tristan Xerri. He's not a high marks player, so that was a success. And he wasn't obliterated in the ruck. I just thought he was beaten. So I think, balancing those things up, I do think he played his role. It definitely wasn't one of his better games. I don't imagine he's going to be in the coaching votes. We know that he is doing very well in the AFL Coaches Association voting at the moment. I don't foresee this will be a voting game for him, but I thought, balancing up, I think he played his role. So I've given him the 1 vote. So just recapping, Larkey and LDU 2 votes, McKercher, Parker and Xerri 1 vote. Xerri very much on the fringes there of receiving the 1 vote. I just couldn't find, a defender who I could say absolutely played their role. And I think it was tough for the forwards to, get involved enough to have said they played their role, except for Nick Larkey, who obviously had an amazing game. I should say McKercher's a defender, but his primary role back there is to distribute and to get the ball moving forward. And I think he did that. Our tall backs weren't up to scratch in this game. The rest of our smalls, McDonald didn't have one of his better games. Riley Hardeman was very quiet. And then the forwards, like Paul Curtis kicked 1, Jake Stanley kicked 1. The ball just didn't get down there enough. Cam Xerri was quiet, probably his worst game for the year. In a year where he's played very well, and it wasn't a game where he made lots of mistakes. He just couldn't really get himself into the game. Yeah, just not enough. Our like I've mentioned, our younger mids plenty. I don't think our wings did a whole lot. Like Finn O'Sullivan was quiet. Dylan Stevens quiet. Jai Simpkin relatively quiet. So tough to find vote getters in this game, and I guess that's why we ended up getting absolutely blown off the park. In terms of what the current standings look like, then Tristan Xerri now outright leader on 19 votes. Behind him, Harry Sheasel on 18. And LDU on 16. And then there is a pack behind there. Luke Parker 15, Paul Curtis 13, Tom Powell 12, Luke McDonald 11, and then Simpkin, Zerha, McKercher, and Larkey all on 10 votes. So still plenty of games to go. I think we've got 7 or 8 games left. Plenty of time for any one of those players to take a leap up the leaderboard and potentially steal the North Podium success, but at the moment it's looking very similar to what it did last year with Xerri, Sheasel and LDU on top. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the loyal North Melbourne fans for listening to this podcast. If you're listening after a game like that, I absolutely salute you. I would totally understand those people that just don't want to think about football until Thursday night. So I do really appreciate it. If you are listening, please share with any North Melbourne fans that you know and subscribe on your chosen podcast service. You can get involved with my social accounts, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, at NorthPod Show. And if you would like to support me and the show in an additional way, you can head to the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. It's buymeacoffee.com/NorthPodShow. You can support me in an additional way there. I tend to use that money to buy myself a cheeky little soft drink or a Coke, but it is called Buy Me a Coffee. And I would like to thank Wolf, who sent through a nice coffee and a nice message during the week. I do really appreciate everyone who gets involved with the show in any way, even just a comment on YouTube to let me know what you thought about the game and what you thought about my thoughts. All of that interaction I really enjoy. So thank you to those people that get involved, and thank you again for your support across this year and previous years, however long you've been around supporting the show. Kanga clipboard time. Couple of quicker things to whip through here as opposed to a real deep dive on something. George Wardlaw is where I would like to start. I think the concussion issues with him now is reaching a significant point of concern. It's no longer an issue where you go, he's got another one, he's going to miss another game. It's more around his long-term future, and I think there's kind of 2 elements to this. Element 1 is, I do think there is a part of the way that he approaches contests which he's going to have to try to adjust. You can never completely coach a player out of the way they attack the footy without destroying them. So I don't think we can completely retool that, but I do think he does need to make some subtle small changes, because the way he's going about it at the moment is creating or putting his head in dangerous situations. That being said, I don't think this one, I think it was Connor Nash that he ran into. I don't think this was a case of him being too dangerous. It was just a bit of bad luck, which will result in him missing next week for sure, and potentially future weeks. He'll miss with the protocol this week, and then it's just around whether or not he has any lingering symptoms, which he very well could, considering how many concussions he's had in the last sort of 24 months. I think that's the more pressing concern for me. Is we've invested a lot in George. We know that he has the potential to be a fantastic player. He's had a bit of a down year. I think when he came into the side, those first few games, he was fantastic. We saw what we'd been missing, and then he sort of drifted away from that across the middle part of the year, I guess. But the amount of concussions he's had now, I don't know how many it is, but I can recall at least 4. The fact that he's accumulating this many is a bit of a concern for his long-term future. We know that players are being medically retired due to concussion. One of the factors in that is how many you have. It's also just a bit of luck and how your body responds to them, how severe they are. There's a lot of factors. So it's not to say that he's guaranteed to go down that path. But I think, like I said, we have invested really heavily in him, and I'm just a bit concerned now that he's a player that potentially, he is one head knock away from being retired, or, having to sit out for a longer period of time because of the way that his body responds to it. So it is a concern. There's not a lot that I think we can do about it in the short term. It's more around getting him fit again in terms of healthy in his head, and then assessing are there some things that we need to change about his game. And it's just that simple stuff like turning your body a little bit, turning your shoulders when you go into contests, so that you're not completely leading with your head. He doesn't do it as a way of earning free kicks. It's not like he's manipulating it that way. It's just that he attacks every contest like a bull to a red rag. He's ferocious, which is what we love about George. It's one of the hallmarks of his game. But I wonder if there are ways to adapt the way that he positions himself as he does that. Because if he's going to get more head knocks, I think it's not going to be good for him, and ultimately it's not going to be good for us, because he is supposed to be one of the pillars that we're building around in that midfield, alongside McKercher, Sheasel, Finn O'Sullivan, this young group that we've drafted over the last couple of years. George Wardlaw is supposed to be a big part of that. I think it's pleasing that we've been able to get through his hamstring issues that he had in his first year and his draft year. For the most part, I feel like we're past that, but the concussions now is a more pressing concern. And it does make me a little bit nervous about his future. I'd expect Wilfill is the likely inclusion for him next week. Similar kind of roles, obviously very different players, but similar in and under more defensively minded midfielders. Wilfield's been playing really well in the VFL and tackling really well. He didn't play this week. It looks to me as though he was a travelling emergency. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think him and Cal Coleman-Jones were the two that went down there. So Wilfield will probably come in. It'll be good for him to get an opportunity, and maybe it could be a couple of weeks, just given I'm sure we'll take a cautious approach with George's concussion. But yeah, that's a concern. Another concern, and I spoke about it a fair bit during the earlier part of the podcast, but the backline was really exposed. The Hawks' tools dominated. Gunston 7, Chol 5, Ramsden 3. So there's 15 goals from their tall forwards. Gunston, if you look at those three, it's not exactly, it's not Lance Franklin and Jared Roughhead supported by Jack Gunston. It's Jack Gunston in what is almost certain to be his last year of footy. There was a chance that he wasn't on a list this year. And he's not a big tall. He's more of a medium-sized player that plays taller. Mabior Chol is a bit taller, but again, is a polarizing player. He's laconic. He's not necessarily a player that dominates forward. He's more of your second or third tall that can go into the ruck, and can be flashy maybe, but he made us look silly. And then Ramsden, their young forward, bobbed up for 3 goals, should have been 4. It's pretty embarrassing. I'm used to being beaten by the smalls. If it was Nick Watson and Jack Ginnivan absolutely torching us with Dylan Moore, that would be less surprising. I mean, Watson did kick 3 goals, Ginnivan kicked 2, but they weren't the ones that absolutely torched us. It was definitely the tools that were doing the damage. For me, we've lauded them the past couple of weeks, the past 8 weeks. I'd say nearly the defence has been better, and particularly last week against Carlton. Toby Pink's been really good recently, but I think, by the same token, it was really poor one-on-one defensive work in this game Griffin Logue, whilst he had some really nice moments, offensively he was pretty thoroughly beaten in the air time and time again. Toby Pink was able to get an intercept mark or two, but his primary matchup for a lot of the game was Jack Gunston. So he's kept Charlie Curnow to 0 goals. I think it was Tracy kept to 0 goals, or certainly one of those Freo tools. He kept quiet. He's had some other scalps in recent weeks, but Gunston took him to the cleaners, and I guess that's you can't compete with the kind of experience and nous that Jack Gunston has. But the fact that he was able to kick a career high 7, he'd kicked 6 several times, but kicked 7 in this game is a real indictment on the defensive group. Will Dawson came in and I thought, like I mentioned, did some nice things, did some okay things, but similarly, was beaten in the air several times. And, I think he'll learn from it. I'm certainly not hanging him out to dry. This might be his 5th, 6th, 7th AFL game. He hasn't played many games. He's definitely got some time to win our respect and find his feet. You think of what Ben Mackay looked like in his first couple of years. I mean, he didn't even play, consistently for several years. So some would argue he's looking pretty inconsistent now, but Will Dawson will be better for the run. I'm certainly not hanging him out to dry, but yeah, defensively across the board we were soundly beaten, and I think we've got to look at how we can better compete one-on-one, and when the ball is coming in quickly, what structures can we put in place. Charlie Coleman, obviously a massive out. He really helps nullify and create spares at contests, but we can't be reliant on one player for that. We need to have a structure that holds up at one player in, one player out, one soldier in, one soldier out type of stuff. It's not what it was looking like at all. I thought that when Shees came into the midfield in that second half when George Wardlaw was off injured, I thought he brought some class into the middle. It's that conundrum of how to best utilise him. I think every week I feel a little bit differently just based on what's happening. I've liked seeing him in that mostly forward role that he's been playing recently, and then we send him back if the ball's just not getting there. I liked the opportunistic play by Clarko to get Shees some centre bounce attendances here with Wardlaw out of the game. He looked at home in that space. It's just where to best utilise him in the future, and I don't think we're any closer to knowing that. I think in an ideal world, in a good team, Harry Sheezel's a mostly forward who can push up into the midfield. I think that's what he looks like in a good team. It's just how long is it going to take for us to be a good team, and therefore how do you best utilise him before that so that we're not wasting development? Because I think we all know he can play well off halfback as a distributor. It's just probably not going to help his development anymore doing that. Colin McKercher's back there doing, I would say, a pretty good job of that at the moment. You've got someone like Zach Fisher and Caleb Daniel who can also do that in the back half. So I think I do want to see Harry Sheezel more as a forward and centre line player, but which of those I'd like him to spend more time in, I think in the forward line, so long as we're competitive. This game was the perfect game to get him into the midfield so he could be more impactful, and I think he was relatively impactful in the second half. He was really quiet, had a really quiet first half. I don't think we saw the best of him in that first half, but finished with 20 disposals, 3 marks, 2 tackles, couple of clearances. I think once he got around the ball, he was able to have a bit more of an impact. So potentially that's a bit of a blueprint for how to use him in the future. And then the other player that I want to touch on was Jack Darling. He didn't look quite right. He was touch and go. I think the reason we flew CCJ down there was in case Jack Darling wasn't able to play after that significant gash on his leg last year. He didn't look quite up to it, wasn't able to present much and give much of a target in the front half, and got bullied really in the ruck when he went in there. Finished with 7 disposals, 1 mark for the game, and 4 hit outs. So not a lot brought to the table. He was able to help in one scoring chain, had a goal assist, but I think this game made me consider and wonder for genuinely the first time this year whether or not we do need a more genuine second ruck option in the team. Whether that's bringing in someone like Bryn Teakle, who hasn't played AFL footy this year, whether we bring in someone like Finbar Maley, who I think is probably underutilised in the ruck, potentially. Like Jack Darling, for me, is really important structurally for the side. I'm not saying drop him based off this one game. I'm not saying drop him at all, because we know that he can be a really important structural player. But Tristan Xerri for the second week in a row looked absolutely gassed, and I think you could argue was beaten in the ruck, which is not something that's been happening in recent weeks. weeks, and it's a different kind of setup this time. They both times they've had a really big, bulky ruck. This week, Meek, last week, Pitnet, who I thought did a really good job at nullifying. So, look, I don't know we don't really have a clear second option, someone that you go, definitely, yet bring them in. Taylor Goad is not ready. I don't think he's a second ruck. I think he's a first ruck. Whether it is like a Will Dawson, if he's playing forward, potentially he could be a second ruck, but I don't know that he's spent any time doing that. So I'm sort of arguing against myself here, but I think Brent Eagle's probably the option. Trouble is, if we have to bring him in, I think we're too tall in the forward line. I think there's a lot of questions that I don't necessarily have answers for here, but what I do think is the last couple of weeks I've been a little bit concerned about Xerri really having to do the majority of the ruck work, and then Darling going in there and just, not being able to compete to the level that we'd like. He's a smart player. He's always giving up size, and as a result, he's generally giving up strength. He's a strong player for his size, no doubt, but if he's going up against someone that's 5 to 10 centimeters taller, invariably you're going to be giving up some weight and therefore some strength. So, look, just some food for thought. I guess big picture, it's probably more important than right now. And I think, potentially someone like Taylor Goad could be, maybe in 3 or 4 years' time, an option that we could play the two of them. Who knows? But it is a question mark for me at the moment. Darling's not quite cutting it for me in the ruck, and I do think we lose a bit of structure when he's out of there, so I'm looking for answers in that area of the ground. And I guess finally, what does this loss actually mean? It's a really disappointing loss. It's not the way that we want that game to go at all, but big picture, is it several steps back? Is it a bit of a blip on the radar? I think we'll know a little bit more this coming week after we play the Dogs. We were relatively competitive with them earlier in the year. Not amazing, but I thought we competed and probably put up a bit of a fight, particularly given the Dogs have gone on to be a relatively good side this year. A little inconsistent, but certainly a stronger side. I think I'm going to wait to judge until we see what happens this week, because the response will, I think, dictate for me, whether this was the blip or if we're sort of crashing back down to earth for the last part of the year. It's certainly not absolute action stations. I think Clarko will review the game really strongly and have some pretty good points to deliver. I'd expect to see some changes through that midfield. Wardlaw coming out is going to make it absolutely certain, and Charlie Common will come back in if he's fit. Jackson Archer, I'm not sure of his fitness. I think he copped a little injury in the VFL last week, but I would definitely expect some changes for next week, and hopefully it's 3 or 4 and we get to see some different things. But the response, I think, is what's going to do it for me in terms of how strongly we feel about this game in the future. Final segment around Arden Street. The VFL was a pretty similar story, actually. A loss to Box Hill, 63-123, so a 10-goal loss. Pretty disappointing that we were able to get belted collectively by about 150 points across the weekend. Bailey Scott was pretty active, had 26 touches, but I wouldn't be expecting him to get a recall next week. Zane Dersma keeps kicking goals, 3 goals, 13 disposals, 5 marks. I would like to see a little bit of him before the year is up, and a bit of an extended run, and it would be nice. So the fact that I feel like he's good for 3 goals a week at the moment, which is fantastic. Finbar Maley kicked a couple of goals. Like I mentioned, CCJ and Wilfield didn't play. They were in Tassie, so they were probably the standout players in a pretty poor performance for the VFL. I wouldn't expect someone to jump out of left field and be selected this week. It's going to be those guys that have been playing well over a longer period of time that might see themselves get into the side. And the other bit of news, I guess, from the week, Tristan Xerri, it was made official that he signed on to 2031. I thought, to be honest, that he'd already signed a longer-term deal. So I'm not sure if it's one of those things where it had been, rumoured and, I guess, spoken about through the press but not officially released by the club, or if it's been re-extended beyond where it was. I'm not too sure of that. To be honest, I probably should have checked that out before I went to air, so to speak. But he's extended to the end of 2031, so I think that'd make it another 6 seasons after this one. It's interesting. We've got some really long contracts in place now. Nick Larkey's on for a long-term deal. Harry Sheasel is. Tristan Xerri is. Jai Simpkin is as the captain. LDU obviously signed long-term not too long ago. We've got that core group that I guess we're wanting to go forward with, and I guess we've got to hope that we're able to find enough pieces around them to make this happen. Yeah, it's interesting because I would have thought, the position that we're in, do we want to be giving these players significantly long-term contract just to go, yep, we've locked them in? Is it that we're getting them on a fairly good clip, and is that the thing that's supportive for us? I'm not too sure. It's great to have security from our perspective, but I think at the end of the day, if a player did want to leave, they'll just leave. The contracts come trade time don't tend to mean a lot. There's obviously the exceptions to the rule. Tom Papley is a good example of a player who wanted to leave but was held to his contract, and Sydney's been able to turn him around. So it does happen, but yeah, I mean, it's a good news story. It's a good feeling thing for the club, but I just don't know how impactful and important it really ends up being if someone did want to leave. Next week's game, it's a big one against the Dogs on Thursday night, 7:30 I think at Marvel Stadium, and it's a centenary celebration for the club. So a really big night. They're on Channel 7, they're on prime time, and like I said, centenary celebration. It's going to be a massive game. I've got some grave concerns about what that could look like for us just based off this Hawthorn game. I think the Dogs are in really strong form recently. The fact that Sam Darcy's back in that side is going to give me nightmares, I think. They're a really strong, tall forward line, the Dogs, and if we can take anything away from this Hawthorn game, it's that we know that we're undersized and underweight down there in defence. So, look, we're going to need a much improved contested performance in there. We're going to need to find a way to at least limit Marcus Bontempelli's impact around stoppage because he is a bull. Tom Liberatore, also another that has been known to damage us around stoppage. So, a lot to think about going into that Western Bulldogs game. We cannot afford to have a repeat of this game against the Hawks. We need to be more competitive. There's just no two ways about it. It's got to be a better game. We don't have to win. It would be fantastic to win and massive to win given the celebration, but we have to compete. It has to be a close game. We have to be in the game at three-quarter time. There's really no two ways about it. If it doesn't go that way, that's where I'd start to be ringing the alarm bells in terms of how the rest of the year might go for us, and just in terms of our development, because it's such a massive game. You'd hope that the majority of the players get up for it. So it's an interesting one. Unfortunately, I won't be able to watch that one live. I play indoor soccer over Thursday night, so I'll be busy and having to watch that on catch up. But it's massive for the club. That they've got this game for a Thursday night, playing a good team. Whilst they're a low drawing Melbourne team, they're a good team this year. So it's a massive game. It's not Good Friday, but it's the next best thing given it's our centenary celebration. So hopefully we're able to show up and perform on Thursday night. I hope that everyone's able to forget that horrible performance and get on with their week and have some success this week. I've got one more week until the school holidays for me as a teacher, so I am looking forward to that. And I'll speak to you in 7 days or so. Have a fantastic week, and always go North. Oh, thank goodness that was over. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at NorthPod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.